The atmosphere in the studio was heavy even before the first words were spoken. Karoline Leavitt and Joy Behar were already locked in a tense stare, their gazes sharp, their expressions unreadable. As soon as Behar spoke, her voice dripped with irony and provocation, as if she were about to drop a bomb right into Leavitt's lap. Let's be honest here, Karoline. Do you really believe you got this job based on merit? Or was it because Trump looked at you and thought, oh, she's a perfect 10, she'll look great on camera? Leavitt blinked slowly, took a deep breath, and crossed her arms. Her silence lasted only a second, but it was enough to turn Behar's provocation into a minefield ready to explode. Wow. So that's what you think about women who work hard? That they only get somewhere because of their looks? Because Joy? That sounds exactly like the kind of sexist comment you claim to fight against every single day on The View. Behar raised an eyebrow, unfazed. Oh, please, don't start with that. This isn't about sexism, and you know it. Trump has a very clear pattern. He likes to surround himself with young, attractive women who, let's be honest, know how to submit. You don't find that just a little bit suspicious? Leavitt let out a dry chuckle, her disbelief evident. What's really suspicious is watching a so-called feminist like you reduce a woman to her appearance. You want to talk about sexism? Here it is, implying that a woman can only be in a position of power because some man put her there as an ornament. Behar crossed her arms and leaned forward, her tone growing sharper. Come on, Karoline. Don't you think it's a little too obvious that all the women Trump hires fit the same mold? Or do you genuinely believe your impeccable resume was the deciding factor? Leavitt held her ground, her gaze cutting. And you don't think it's just as obvious when your side promotes people based purely on ideological identity? Let's be honest. The left loves empowering women, as long as they stick to the script. But the moment a woman thinks for herself, like me, suddenly she's undeserving. How convenient. The studio tensed. The audience could feel it. Neither of them would back down an inch. Behar scoffed, a smirk playing on her lips. Oh, stop playing the victim, Karoline. This isn't about being conservative or liberal. It's about a clear pattern. Do you seriously believe Trump looked at your resume before hiring you? Or did he just see a young blonde and decide she'd look good on TV? Leavitt let out a short, cold laugh as if she had been waiting for this exact moment. You know what's funny, Joy? If a man had said exactly what you just did, you'd be demanding his resignation right now. But since it came from you, and since it's aimed at someone who doesn't follow your ideology, it's perfectly fine, isn't it? The audience murmured. Behar opened her mouth to respond but hesitated for just a second. A second too long. Leavitt saw the opening and didn't miss a beat. The truth is, you can't stand seeing a young, successful woman who doesn't need to play the victim card to get ahead. Because the feminism you preach isn't about empowerment, it's about control. And women like me? We're a threat to your narrative. The tension swelled, like a wave ready to crash. The studio felt divided. Behar realized she couldn't afford to back down now. The debate was only beginning, and the battle of words was just heating up. The moment of hesitation in Joy Behar's expression was fleeting, but Karoline Leavitt had already seized it. The studio air felt heavier, as if the confrontation had gone from a simple exchange of words to a full-fledged ideological war. Behar, never one to retreat, leaned in, her eyes narrowing as she prepared her counterattack. Oh, give me a break, Karoline. You're acting like you're some kind of martyr for women. But let's talk about reality. You weren't chosen because you're smart, capable, or accomplished. You were chosen because Donald Trump has a long history of surrounding himself with a certain type of woman. Young, conventionally attractive, obedient. Do you think you're the exception? Leavitt's lips curled into a smirk, her confidence unwavering. And let me guess, Joy, when someone like Kamala Harris or Karine Jean-Pierre is appointed, it's all about their qualifications, right? Not about identity politics, not about optics, just pure merit. Spare me the hypocrisy. You don't have a problem with women being promoted. You have a problem with women being promoted who don't align with your worldview. Behar let out a sharp laugh, shaking her head. Oh, please. Are you really going to compare yourself to Kamala Harris? She spent years as a prosecutor, was a senator. She's actually done the work. Meanwhile, you were working for a propaganda machine parroting Trump's every word, and somehow you think that puts you on the same playing field? Leavitt's smile didn't falter. In fact, it widened, her eyes flashing with something dangerously close to amusement. And there it is, the ultimate leftist argument. Your accomplishments don't count unless I approve of them. Funny, I don't remember anyone questioning Karine Jean-Pierre's credentials when she was appointed, despite the fact that she has repeatedly proven to be incompetent at the podium. But I guess it's fine when she fumbles because she checks the right diversity boxes, right? The audience let out an audible gasp. Behar stiffened, her fingers tapping impatiently against the desk in front of her. You really are shameless, aren't you? What you don't seem to understand, Karoline, is that being a mouthpiece for Trump isn't a qualification. It's a requirement. He doesn't pick people because they're competent. He picks people because they're loyal. That's why you're here. Leavitt tilted her head slightly, studying Behar with an almost patronizing look. And what do you think you are, Joy? You think you sit in that chair every day because you're some independent thinker? Let's be real. You're here because you do exactly what's expected of you. You toe the line. You push the right narratives. The only difference is that my side is honest about it. We don't pretend to be unbiased journalists while selling propaganda. Behar's jaw clenched. She had spent years on television, years debating guests, clashing with conservatives, cutting through arguments with her sharp wit. But Leavitt wasn't flustered, she wasn't backing down, and that irritated her more than anything. You can deflect all you want, Behar shot back, her voice lowering into something almost menacing. But you still haven't answered the question. Do you really believe that if you weren't young, blonde, and photogenic, you'd be standing at that White House podium? Leavitt's smirk disappeared. Her expression turned serious, and for the first time in the debate, she leaned in as well, closing the space between them. And do you really believe that if I were a liberal, you'd be questioning my qualifications at all? Because let's be honest, Joy, if I were sitting on your side of the aisle, you'd be singing my praises as an inspiring young woman in politics. The only reason you're trying to diminish my accomplishments is because I don't fit your narrative of what a successful woman should be. Behar exhaled sharply, frustration flashing in her eyes. Oh, don't flatter yourself. No one is diminishing your accomplishments. We're just calling out the obvious. You were picked for optics, plain and simple. Trump doesn't respect women. He never has. And if you think you're some kind of exception, you're fooling yourself. You're useful to him for now. But when he doesn't need you anymore, you'll be tossed aside like all the others. Leavitt let the words settle in the air, but instead of recoiling, she let out another short, amused chuckle. That's rich coming from you, Joy. You've been sitting in that same chair for years, spewing the same talking points, working for the same network that profits off division and outrage. If anyone here is being used, it's you. You think you're in control, but you're just another puppet in the media machine, playing your part, reading your script, attacking the right people while protecting the right narratives. The difference between us? I know exactly where I stand. You think you're calling the shots when in reality you're just another cog in the machine. The studio was silent. Behar's lips pressed into a thin line, her mind working furiously to craft a response, but before she could open her mouth, Leavitt leaned back, a victorious glint in her eye. You can keep trying to frame me as some clueless little girl who got lucky, she added, her voice smooth, almost playful. But deep down you know the truth. I earned my place, and that terrifies you. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Behar's fingers curled into a loose fist on the desk, her expression unreadable. The debate had escalated into something much more than just a disagreement about Leavitt's qualifications. It had become a battle over who controlled the narrative, who got to define success, power, and credibility, and neither of them was willing to surrender. The silence in the studio wasn't just heavy, it was suffocating. For a moment, neither woman spoke, their gazes locked in a battle more intense than the words they had exchanged. Then Joy Behar leaned back slightly, crossing her arms, a slow smirk forming on her lips. She wasn't done. Not even close. You know what, Karoline? You keep talking about narratives and control like you're some kind of revolutionary, but let's call it what it is. You're just another political pawn. A useful face to put in front of the cameras. So Trump's base can point at you and say, see, we support women. But let's not pretend for 1 second that you'd be sitting at that White House podium if you weren't willing to do exactly what he tells you. Leavitt's smile remained, but there was a flicker of something colder in her eyes now. That's funny coming from you, Joy. Because if there's anyone on this stage who's a mouthpiece, it's you. You've spent years sitting in that chair, regurgitating the same tired talking points, trashing conservatives and pushing whatever agenda your producers tell you to push. The only difference between us? I admit who I work for. You act like you're an independent thinker when in reality you're just another media puppet. Behar's smirk vanished instantly. Oh, give me a break. I've been in this business longer than you've been alive. I know exactly how this game is played, and I can tell you one thing. You're not fooling anyone. You can dress it up however you want, but at the end of the day, you're just the latest in a long line of young conservative women who are paraded around to make the right look more inclusive. And you know what happens to them? They get replaced the second they step out of line. Leavitt tilted her head, amusement flickering in her expression. Oh, you mean like how the left eats their own the moment someone doesn't follow the script perfectly? We've all seen what happens when one of your own dares to think independently. You call them sellouts, grifters, you cancel them. And yet you sit here pretending that it's my side that's intolerant? Behar scoffed. Oh, spare me the victim routine. No one on my side is blindly worshipping one man like a cult leader. You, on the other hand, will say whatever Trump wants you to say, do whatever he wants you to do. Because you know damn well the second you step out of line, you're done. Leavitt's expression hardened. That's where you're wrong. I'm not here because I worship anyone. I'm here because I believe in something. Unlike you, who has built an entire career on tearing people down while offering nothing of substance in return. You sit on this show every day, mocking conservatives, sneering at anyone who doesn't think like you, acting like you're some intellectual heavyweight when, in reality, all you do is repeat the same tired insults over and over again. It's not analysis, it's just bitterness. Behar's eyes darkened. And what exactly do you offer, Karoline? Other than being a walking PR stunt for a man who doesn't respect women unless they serve his purpose? Tell me, when he eventually turns on you like he does with everyone, will you still be so loyal? Leavitt didn't flinch. And when your network finally decides you're no longer useful, when they push you out for someone younger, edgier, more willing to toe the corporate line, will you still pretend to be this fearless truth-teller? Because, let's be honest, Joy, you're not sitting in that chair because you're a radical thinker. You're there because you play your role perfectly, just like you accuse me of doing. Behar's nostrils flared slightly, but she refused to look shaken. Instead, she leaned forward again, her voice lower, more deliberate. You know what the difference is, Karoline. I built my career. I fought my way up. I wasn't handed a job because of my looks. I wasn't plucked out of nowhere to be a token. I earned my place, and I'll still be here long after you've been replaced by the next young, fresh conservative who's willing to smile and defend the indefensible. Leavitt's smirk returned, but this time it was sharper, edged with something almost lethal. And yet, despite all that experience, and here we are, me sitting at the White House podium at 26 years old, and you still sitting in the same chair, ranting about people who have surpassed you. If you were really as powerful as you think you are, Joy, you wouldn't need to spend so much time trying to tear other women down. The words hung in the air like a final blow, sharp and undeniable. Behar's jaw tensed, her fingers gripping the table just a little tighter. She had been in countless debates before, but this was different. Leavitt wasn't just defending herself. She was dismantling the entire premise of Behar's attack. And for the first time, it wasn't clear who had the upper hand. The tension in the studio was suffocating. The silence between Joy Behar and Karoline Leavitt wasn't just a pause. It was a battlefield. Every person watching, whether in the audience or through a screen, could feel that this wasn't just another political debate. This was personal. Behar had spent years verbally dismantling conservative figures, but Leavitt wasn't just holding her ground. She was pushing back, forcing Behar to confront something she wasn't used to. Resistance that didn't waver, didn't retreat, and most importantly, didn't care about her approval. Behar exhaled sharply, her patience wearing thin. "You can spin it however you want, Karoline, but deep down you know the truth. You're not here because you fought for it. You're not here because you worked your way up the ranks. You're here because you were handpicked to be the fresh, young, photogenic face of a party that needed to rebrand. And when they're done with you, they'll discard you, just like they do with everyone who outlives their usefulness." Leavitt leaned forward, her eyes burning with a quiet intensity. "And yet here I am, and here you are, spending all this time trying to convince yourself that I don't deserve to be where I am. But let's be real, Joy, if I were a Democrat, you'd be celebrating me as a trailblazer. The only reason you're attacking me is because I refuse to play the victim, and that terrifies you." Behar's laugh was dry, hollow. "Oh, don't flatter yourself. No one is scared of you, Karoline. We just see right through the act. You're not some revolutionary. You're just the latest in a long line of conservative women who get used for PR, who defend the indefensible, who think loyalty to a man who only values you for optics is somehow a win. It's pathetic." Leavitt's smile didn't fade. If anything, it grew colder. "What's pathetic, Joy, is that you think you're different. You sit there every day, selling outrage, attacking anyone who doesn't think like you, pretending to be this fearless voice of reason when, in reality, you're just as much a puppet as you claim I am. The only difference? I know exactly what I stand for. You've spent so long tearing other people down that you don't even realize that one day, the same machine you've been feeding will turn on you. And when that happens, when they finally decide you're no longer useful, do you think anyone will fight for you?" Behar stiffened. Her lips parted as if she were about to fire back. But for the first time in the debate, she hesitated. It was barely a second, a fleeting crack in her armor, but Leavitt saw it. And she struck. "That's the real difference between us, Joy. You need this chair. You need this platform. Without it, you're nothing. Me? I'll be just fine." The room fell into a stunned silence. Behar's expression was unreadable, her jaw tight, her hands clenched into fists against the table. She had spent her career dominating conversations, shutting down opponents with cutting remarks and sharp wit. But this time, she wasn't the one who had the final word. Leavitt sat back, crossing her arms, her gaze unwavering. She had won. Not because she had shouted louder, not because she had thrown out more insults, but because she had exposed the one thing Behar never wanted to acknowledge: her own irrelevance in the grand scheme of things. The cameras kept rolling. The debate was over, but the impact of what had just happened would linger far beyond the studio walls.